Vivek Ramaswamy being attacked by the right. Back in 2024, during the Republican presidential primary, I was actually happy to see Vivek run. Previously, I'd seen him have a discussion with Ben Shapiro, and my impression of him was that he was a basic libertarian type. But crap, it looked like I was wrong as he mounted up that campaign and gutted Nikki Haley and Chris Christie up on stage. Had me sitting back at home for once clapping like a seal at a zoo, which is very rare. Usually I don't get that amped up about presidential politics or especially the debates. I don't get that excited about it. I try to remain cool, calm, and impartial. But you have to understand how unpopular Nikki Haley is in my particular conservative section of South Carolina. We cannot stand having her as our governor and her walking around talking about being a former governor of our state. It was also really good to see Tim Scott criticize her on her record and expose her for the fraud that she was, attacking her for raising taxes, seeing her say, "No, I didn't do that," then him telling the whole audience to Google it when they get home, her then realizing, "Oh crap, the whole country is going to realize I'm a fraud, a fake, and a failure, and I'm a liar." So then she tried to backpedal and say, "Oh, well, yeah, I raised taxes because I was able to shift some money around over here and ended up being a good deal for the people of South Carolina." So she was called out as a liar and then backpedaled and tried to explain her lies. So that was a great thing that happened to Nikki Haley. And even though that happened with Tim Scott, the person who actually attacked her the most was Vivek when he said, "Look at the vacant stare in her eyes. She couldn't even name provinces of Ukraine." And then she just kind of like stood there fuming because she was mad, but she didn't say anything. And he said, "Look at the vacant stare in her eyes." And the audience started laughing and applauding. One of the best moments I've ever seen to this point in a presidential debate. I loved it. I was so happy to see someone expose her because the problem is it's not just about her. Everyone up on that stage would have flunked that test except maybe Vivek. So that being said, I was a Vivek fan. I was looking to him saying, "You know what? You're a Hindu, and I don't like the fact that you don't agree with our Christian values. However, if you're anti-left and pro-restricting immigration, both legal and illegal," which is what he sounded like he was talking about in the primary, he would always hit immigration hard and be anti-war. He would talk about that. I was a fan. I said, "Look, let's get past this election. Trump needs to get in there. But in the future, I will watch you with great interest." I'm not saying I will vote for you. I never said I would vote for him. In fact, I said many times the opposite, that I would have great difficulty and ultimately would not because of him being Hindu. And I believe in Christian values for this nation, for this country, that it is the best system that we need to have. And as I become a Christian nationalist, that's even more the case. But then some stuff started to happen with the immigration issue around Christmas time of 2024. So we're going to talk about that in a minute, and I'm going to talk about his fall from grace. But let's look at the most recent controversy. So recently, I'm going to pull these up on screen. We had this, a picture of a bunch of men, looks like pastors, praying over Vivek Ramaswamy with the caption "grateful." Now, let's just take it on its face. Don't have a huge problem with him saying grateful just in general, right? He may just be saying he's grateful for people around him. The people that are around him in that room are good men, and he's thankful for their brotherhood, the camaraderie they have being right wingers, what have you, conservatives, not really right wingers. I wouldn't consider any of them right wingers, but conservative, right of center, sure. He's maybe saying he's just grateful for their companionship, for their time that day, for their prayers. Don't really have a big problem. But some of the comments were really funny, and I think it's worth pouring over these. So we have here, obviously, again, the photo, him saying grateful with his hands folded, brown hands folded. Then we have this great comment from the great Orrin McIntyre saying, "To Christ, right?" To Christ, right? And then that led to another comment, which was just too good, which was, it looks like Crusader Pepe commented this photo of Padme from Star Wars. Which I love. I love the meme culture that we're living in right now, the jokes, and Twitter is really good for that. So that cracked me up. The whole posting of, to Christ, right? And then the face of Padme. Another one that was pretty good. Vivek thinks there are more gods than there are pastors in this photo. Love it. It's very true. I mean, they believe conservatively in thousands. It's sometimes estimated to be more like millions of gods, depending on the strand of Hinduism, I guess. And then we have that one. Vivek thinks there are more gods than there are pastors in this photo. Then we have this one. Vivek isn't Christian. This is a group of people worshiping Satan. Hate to say it, not really, because I'm saying it anyway. Isn't it funny when people say, "Oh, I hate to say it," and then they just proceed to say whatever they want? It's like someone saying, "With all due respect," and then they say whatever they want, like Ricky Bobby back in Talladega Nights. It's very true, by the way. One of the truest lines of that film is, "With all due respect," and then he says, "Well, that's what it means. When you say with all due respect, you get to say whatever you want to say." It's like that's not what that means. It's like, well, yeah, it kind of is. It really kind of is. So, yeah, it's true. These people are not worshiping the one true God. These deities they worship, at the least, are demons or just fake false gods. I would argue demons, because when you look at their attributes and stuff, it's actually very similar to other spiritual forces. At most, Satan himself. So he says, this is a group of people that are worshiping Satan. Another comment. Which one of your 2,000 gods were you praying to? Someone asks Vivek Ramaswamy. That's a decent question. I mean, it's 2000, again, conservatively God. So we know they were praying to the Lord, but who were you praying to? Which one of your 2,000 gods were you praying to? And then someone else just says, who are you praying to, Vivek? Who's asking a funny question. Well, so then we have, and this is kind of the reason for this video, a comment here. Who cares as long as it isn't Baal? Putting faith in a higher power and humbling yourself before God should be respected regardless of fate. Of faith. No. I don't really agree, because do you really want a bunch of Muslims here? They believe in one God. Do you really want a bunch of Zionist Jewish types here? No, not really. They can be here as long as they don't hold any power, but they have a stranglehold over American politics, particularly American foreign policy. And when you look at Europe, it's very clear what Islam is doing to Europe. So as long as they're devout, no, that doesn't really cut any glass with me. These people don't all need to be here. We should be a nation, a country that is based on Christian values. And that's the thing. I've tweeted about this whenever. Now it's Lord Orcon over on Twitter, but still at fogandwhirlwind. And so I tweeted this a long time ago. This account stands for Real America First Foreign Policy. I have a blog post about this. Border security, fair trade, godly men leading, Christian values, local political action, right-wing elite theory. Part of that, which would be the whole thing with godly men leading and Christian values, when I write the term godly, I don't mean, well, as long as you're devout, as long as you really believe what you believe in your heart. No, I'm talking about Christian men, godly men who are leading in Christian values. Particularly, I would argue for Reformed theology, but if you are Catholic or Eastern Orthodox or just regular basic Baptist or Pentecostal, but you are hardcore in your beliefs, you're very Christian, you want to get out of the wars, you want to advocate for free trade, and you want to stop immigration coming to this country, God bless you. We're going to have our theological differences, but God bless you. I will vote for you, line up to vote for you every single time. If you say Christ is King, if you believe in the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit is God, that's the thing. I don't go with oneness Pentecostals on this either. I don't consider them real Christians for the same reason I wouldn't a Mormon or a Jehovah's Witness or something weird like that, or a Unitarian who's like, well, I'm a Christian. Well, you're a Unitarian, so no. But it's very important to have Christian values in this country, because that's what this country was founded on. If you want to keep a good thing going, you really need to be applying of the same values. So that's an important thing that I wanted to talk to you guys here about, because although he calls himself a nationalist, he's not a Christian nationalist. He has said at times, "Oh, I'm a monotheist." That's not Hinduism. Then there's no such thing as someone who's a monotheist and a Hindu. I've never heard of that in my entire freaking life. It sounds like he's just trying to build unity with people when really he's different from them. Back to things being different. Let me read the following tweet. This is really when I was like, okay, I'm completely out. I was already out when it came to voting for Vivek, but I'm definitely not now. So let me just show this to you. Have a tweet. This I've already covered at some point. I retweeted it. I think I covered it maybe in a blog post or maybe just an episode of my podcast. The reason top tech companies often hire, this is back towards December, often hire foreign born and first generation engineers over so called Native Americans isn't because of an innate American IQ deficit, a lazy and wrong explanation. A key part of it comes down to the C word, culture. Tough questions demand tough answers, and if we're really serious about fixing the problem, we have to confront the truth. Our American culture has venerated mediocrity over excellence for way too long, at least since the 90s and likely longer. That doesn't start in college, it starts young. A culture that celebrates the prom queen over the math Olympiad champ or the jock over the valedictorian will not produce the best engineers. A culture that venerates Corey from Boy Meets World or Zack and Slater over Screech and Saved by the Bell or Stefan over Steve Urkel in Family Matters will not produce the best engineers. Fact, I know multiple sets of immigrant parents in the 90s who actively limited how much their kids could watch those TV shows precisely because they promoted mediocrity. And their kids went on to become wildly successful STEM graduates. More movies like Whiplash, fewer reruns of Friends. Okay, I'll pause and say amen. I don't know about Whiplash, but Friends is trash. More math tutoring, fewer sleepovers. More weekend science competitions, fewer Saturday morning cartoons, more books, less TV, more creating, less chilling, more extracurriculars, less hanging out at the mall. This can be our Sputnik moment. We've awakened from slumber before and we can do it again. Trump's election hopefully marks the beginning of a new golden era in America, but only if our culture fully wakes up. A culture that once again prioritizes achievement over normalcy, excellency over mediocrity, nerdiness over conformity, hard work over laziness. That's the work we have cut out for us rather than wallowing in victimhood and just wishing or legislating alternative hiring practices into existence. I'm confident we can do it. So there's actually some of that I agree with. So I've talked all the time about I want to preserve American culture, but I always give the caveat of not modern American culture. Modern American culture is actually pretty crappy for some of the reasons that he's outlined. The dumb sitcoms that don't really have any value to them, and just stupid music on the radio, a lot of which glorifies violence and treating women like crap and yourself like crap and doing drugs and things like that. That's a modern American culture for you. The old American culture, more like Andy Griffith's show, I would even say things like I Love Lucy or what's the other one that was in my head? Dick Van Dyke's show. And he's been a Christian for a very long time, although I disagree with him politically. But the values, the subtext, they didn't always get explicitly religious. In fact, they almost never did. But there was a lot of Christian values. Again, a culture, American culture, that was good. Fathers Knows Best was another one. Ward Cleaver in Leave It to Beaver. That was an American culture worth fighting for, remembering, and preserving. And it was squandered for what was cool and hot and fresh. They decided to settle for Tim Allen, Tim the Toolman Taylor, instead of Ward Cleaver, a man that was strong, who paid his bills on time and was wise, or Andy Griffith in many ways, see above. And instead they exchanged him for this guy who was masculine, but kind of a clown. And look, I really like the Tim Allen we get now, but make no mistake, his old character of Tim the Toolman Taylor was a clown. And so, in terms of that, I don't really mind if that goes away, but don't replace it with this, well, we're all just going to be colorblind and bring in millions of people in legally. No, we need to preserve the old American culture, get back to that, preserve it, and have a resurgence of it, restore it, and not, we don't want to, bring in all these legal immigrants to replace us and say, well, they're going to outwork you. Because he tried to also say, this is where he got lazy, frankly, and said, we don't need alternative hiring practices. Well, border policy and immigration policy is not an alternative hiring practice. That's making sure that the best come into this country. And I've been very clear. I want a 100-year moratorium so that we can have the people who are here legally assimilate to culture. Then we'll have a discussion about bringing people back in. And by the way, that's historically what we've done, not since the 60s, but previously, whenever we let people in, we would then close the border for a time. It's been since the 60s that we've decided to just roll this thing wide open, which is unwise. So when it comes to Vivek, I'm done. I don't really care about the guy. I think he's bad news. I think he's kind of a grifter and a con artist, frankly. And when you look at some of his ties to Big Pharma, just do some research on that for a while and get back to me. But I tweeted about this a while ago. I said Vivek will run for president again. This was right after he tweeted this that I just read you. Remember what he said last week. He wants to flood our country with cheap labor to take our jobs. Don't forget the week he showed his true colors. So don't. Now, that being said, a lot of people were just saying, say Christ is king, Vivek, to the first tweet that I was looking at. That's not helpful. Pray for Vivek. I think if we want to get one thing trending on Twitter right now that Vivek is being attacked, it's hashtag pray for Vivek, hashtag Christ is king, and hashtag Vivek seek Christ, something like that. And don't do Vivek seek SIHK or whatever it is. Don't do that. Don't do a pun like that. I'm definitely not endorsing that. But if you were to, tweet it, would I like it? Would I retweet you? Would I follow you? I plead the fifth. But that being said, Vivek should seek Christ. Pray for that, but don't support him politically. Support him spiritually in the sense of trying to get him to the right direction and ask him to repent kindly and sweetly and Christ-likely. I don't know if I made up a word just now, but that's what we should be doing. Praying for his salvation, treating him with charity, but not allowing him to hold power in our country because we need a country and a government of Christian values. Thank you.